Hi, it's Coach Arns again. We're here to talk today about King Henry VIII. This is the English Reformation. This is where King Henry VIII takes England away from Roman Catholicism and away from the authority of the Pope. You see, King Henry VIII got married, and then he became, and he was a king around 1509, and everything was going fine. He married a woman named Catherine of Aragon, and she had a child, but she never had any sons that lived. So he really wanted to get another wife. And him being the king, he figured, well, he should be able to do what he wants to do. The only problem was him being Catholic. It was illegal to get a divorce. Now, there was something called an annulment, so he wanted the Pope to annul his marriage. The only way you can really get an annulment or to have a marriage annulled is if it's an illegal marriage or the marriage wasn't really consummated. So, anyway, it was consummated because they had some kids. So the Pope said he couldn't do that. The Pope also was very concerned because Catherine of Aragon, her nephew was the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V. It's really hard to follow. All these royal people, they're all interbred. They're all cousins and nephews and stuff of each other, so it's hard to follow all of it. But the bottom line is, Catherine of Aragon's nephew was a Holy Roman Emperor. The Pope didn't want to make him mad because they were good friends and political and religious partners. So, King Henry VIII decided, since he was so powerful because he was the king, that he would remove England from the power of the Pope. And this after King Henry VIII even criticized Martin Luther, because this all happened right around the same time. So, King Henry VIII got Parliament in England to pass the Act of Supremacy. The Act of Supremacy says that the king is the leader of the Church of England. So they basically created a brand new Protestant church called the Church of England. Now the real problem is it was Protestant in name only because it was still rather Catholic. All the church services were very Catholic. Everything that they did was still really Catholic. And a lot of people in England wanted to kind of be more Protestant. So that didn't work so well. Anyway, King Henry VIII, he got married to his second wife, Anne Boleyn, and they had a child, and that went fairly well. Okay, so Henry VIII, he ended up marrying Anne Boleyn. That was his second wife. There were 6 wives. You can go look all of them up and study them if you want to. It's really quite interesting. So, but he really wanted a son. The reason he wanted a son so badly was because he wanted a male heir to take over when he died. He didn't want it left to a female heir. See, before Henry was the king, his dad, Henry VII, was king of England. His dad had to fight a series of wars to become the king, so Henry wanted there to be a smooth transition. So, Anne Boleyn was his second wife. They had a child named Elizabeth, who she would become queen later. And then, but she didn't have any sons. So Henry VIII decided to put Anne Boleyn in prison. So he put her in prison, and she stayed in prison. All right. So his next wife, his third wife, her name was Jane Seymour. Jane was lucky enough to have a son. His name was Edward. And then she died a couple weeks after he was born. And there was like 3 more wives of Henry VIII. All right, so to make a long story short, Henry wanted a son. He got a son. And when he died, his son took over. His son was Edward VI. Edward VI was only 9 when he took over. So he can't really rule when he's 9, or the only thing that everybody would have would be like cake and ice cream for every meal. So Edward needed advisors around him, and these advisors were Protestant. And they were kind of real Protestants. They weren't like Protestant in name only. They were actual Protestants. And the Church of England became more Protestant, and that was good. And he didn't live all that long. Okay, so Edward died. He was Protestant. So the next in line was a woman named Mary. Mary was Catholic. Her mom was the first wife of Henry VIII, Catherine of Aragon. Her name was Mary, Queen of Scots. She was devoutly Catholic, just like her mother, just like all her mother's family. And in fact, she was so Catholic, she hated Protestants so much that she had like 300 of them burned at the stake and killed for heresy, and that's why they called her Bloody Mary. she didn't last all that long either. She brought England back to the papacy, back to the Roman Catholic Church. That upset a lot of people. One thing led to another, and eventually Elizabeth became the next Queen of England, Elizabeth I. Her mom was Anne Boleyn. Elizabeth was a very long ruling monarch, a queen, and was very much beloved by all the people, and did a great job as queen. And she never did marry. She never did have kids. So that's kind of the story of the English part of the Reformation. King Henry VIII wanting his marriage annulled, wanting a son, and then having some children, and that set up the whole process of England going back and forth between Protestant Catholic, and then really deciding on ultimately being its own Church of England. And it was known as the Anglican Church, and still is known as the Anglican Church, all by this act of supremacy that started with King Henry VIII.